This week we're reviewing Matthew Polly's awesome book, American Shaolin. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. My name's Matt. If you're new here, this is a channel about Chinese martial arts. Matthew Polly went and trained with the Shaolin monks back in 1992 and lived there for 3 years. Let's talk about his story. So this is the second one of these book reviews I've done. I'm not going to go and read a book and record a video about a book that I think is crap. So spoiler alert, I really liked it. Let's talk about what we can learn from the book and why you might want to read it as well. Matthew Polly, back in the early 90s, was a young man. He'd been studying a little bit of Chinese martial arts and had been immersed in the culture, learned some Chinese, which I recommend you should do too. Check out my video on that. This isn't going to spoil anything. You know he goes to the Shaolin temple. The clue's in the name, by the way. Anyway, so Matthew Polly was a bit of a scaredy cat. He wasn't particularly confident, terrible with women, and he somehow thought he'd go on this spiritual journey to find Shaolin, train there, and he would somehow come out of his chrysalis as a wonderful butterfly or something. I don't know. He didn't know where it was. This was back in the 90s, early 90s. There was no internet, so to speak, so it was literally word of mouth. Somehow he gets his way to the Shaolin temple, and then the hilarity starts. He has to start negotiating his way to train, who he trains with and all the rest of it. And so you go on this journey with him. Through his training at the Shaolin temple, he hopes to come out a man. I really enjoyed reading it, and it was one of those ones that sort of mimics lots of our own journeys in Chinese martial arts of turning up this young weakling and starting to change. Certainly I know I was a scrawny pacifist when I first started Chinese martial arts back in the day, and now look at me. I think it's really worth the read. Anyone who's done Chinese martial arts will find loads of stuff in here that you will just, one, it will make you laugh, but also you've probably got similar stories, and it's quite cool to just immerse yourself a bit in the culture and enjoy hearing about someone else's journey. And he does end up having a lot of fights and joining the Sandar team and competing. So, you know, he's not simply just waving his arms around. Let's talk about what we can learn from it, because that's why we're here. Matthew Polly's got this really cool journalistic style. It's kind of informal and relaxed. It's very well written. It's not sort of someone who's first and foremost a martial artist and has, you know, done a bit of writing. He's a really good writer, and that is partly what makes the book so enjoyable, because the descriptions of things are so funny. It's just great. He starts training in forms at Shaolin and struggles and puts in hours and hours of eating bitter. And throughout the book he talks about the culture with the monks. So they're training, different monks may be known for different forms, they've got different types of skill, and it's a really kind of cool insight into not just, yeah, there are monks, they're training, great. Say monks, you know, we're talking the fighting monks who do these performances for tourists and stuff like that. So it's really cool in that he goes behind the scenes and talks about, you know, just hanging out with the monks and the life training there well before anyone was doing it. I don't know if anyone's seen Renton's channel, but he's done some cool videos about his training in Shaolin there as well. Just sort of encapsulate it in this really cool way of literally they're just these young men who just hanging out. They've got nothing else to do all day, so they just go and train for hours and hours. Tourists turn up, maybe do some performances, go back to training for hours. It's a really cool snapshot of time of just what it was like to be there and train with the monks then. Now, I don't want to end up just telling you the entire story of the book, because that would be a waste of your time and mine. I recommend you read it. It's really cool. You're going to get a lot from reading the book, but there's some cool stuff that I want to talk about now that is one of the things you can take away from the book and from reading about it. So if you don't know much about Chinese culture, this book is awesome. Let's talk about some of those cultural things you can learn from the book. If you read it, you'll get some insights into the stories behind just these bits of culture. So some things happen in the story and you will learn about the culture as these things happen. So the first one is like mianzi, where it's all about face, keeping face, making sure someone else doesn't lose face, or if you fall out with someone, making sure that they lose face. Linked to that, I guess, to a degree, is guanxi. Guanxi is something that is central to Chinese culture, and it's your relationship with other people, and that affects everything. Eating bitter is another one where it's basically, you've got to put hours and hours of blood, sweat and tears. It's the pain that you go through to achieve anything. You have to eat bitter in order to succeed. Now, another one which comes up, which is anyone who's done much time in China The drinking culture is hilarious. When you clink glasses together, you go lower to sort of say you're lower than the other person, and in China you always end up sort of with your hand on the floor and they go, oh, you know, Chinese culture so great, oh, they're just being polite. But it's just part of the fun and games of when you're in China. It's quite enjoyable, especially if you know some of these little things. You'll notice these things if you start watching any Chinese movies and stuff, that there's loads of this stuff like eating bitter, some of the drinking culture, and guanxi and stuff, how important it is and runs all the way through Chinese culture. As I say, as with all these things, Chinese martial arts is just so rich with all this emotional baggage that comes with it. A lot of the book that's really enjoyable is with all the extra stuff, the stuff that happens outside training, and the lessons the young Matthew Polly learns as he's doing it. He ends up doing some sandar and doing these challenge matches, as I say, and the challenge matches are really cool because it's not just so-and-so had a fight with so-and-so, that was it. Particularly when Matthew Polly's involved, talks about the etiquette leading up to these fights and who's maybe offering to fight instead and what different things mean and his emotions going through the whole process. So he comes out a changed man by the end of it, and certainly you feel like you go through this journey with him. There are loads of pictures in there, especially as a monk Dong who has his iron crotch training, and there are some interesting photos in here, I will tell you that. It's cool. It's a really cool book. Give it a read. I loved it. I still love it. So if you enjoyed this video, I've done another one about a book called Chinese Boxing Masters and Methods, which is an awesome book. Robert Smith goes to Taiwan and trains with the masters back there and details his exploits. So check that one out. That's a really good one to check out. And I would really appreciate it. You would help me out a huge amount if you could hit the subscribe button. If you want to get notifications about when my book reviews come out for similar books that I think are worth reading, hit the bell as well. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks very much.